Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for immigration. Now, let me first sort of explain how we got here, because we have to go back to one law that changed everything. In 1965, the United States passed something called the Immigration and Nationality Act. Some people call it the Hart-Celler Act. Now, the goal was to end an old immigration system that prioritized European immigrants over everyone else. Before 1965, the US used quotas that favored immigrants from countries like the UK and Germany, Italy, and it limited immigration from Asia, Africa, and parts of Latin America. Now, at that time, in the context of the civil rights movement, they were trying to change that. So Hart-Celler did actually three big things. First, it got rid of those quotas completely. Second, it replaced it with a system that was based mostly on something called family reunification and employment-based visas. And three, it placed a cap on immigration from the Western world for the first time.
From this day forth, those wishing to immigrate to America shall be admitted on the basis of their skills and their close relationships to those already here.
Now, here's something really important. At that time, politicians told the public that this law would not really change the demographic makeup of the United States. President Lyndon Johnson said himself that the law would not reshape America. It would not be flooded with immigrants, and it would not change its cultural identity. And a lot of people voted for it, probably believed it, because on paper, the law was not about mass immigration.
They thought, well, people who have family members who want to reunify with them, that's mostly going to be Europeans. As it turns out, that really wasn't the case.
What lawmakers either didn't understand or did not explain to the public is how something called chain migration works. You see, when you prioritize that concept of family reunification, one immigrant coming here does not just mean one person. It means their parents and their siblings, their spouses, their children. Multiple generations of people could come here all because of one person. And that created exponential growth. Now, once the door was open to the rest of the world, especially to places with much bigger populations and much higher demands to move to the US, everything changed. Now, it wasn't immediate, didn't happen overnight, but over decades and decades, it completely changed the flow of immigration into the US, because before 1965, the majority of immigrants came from Europe. After 1965, immigrants came mostly from Latin America, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. So when people argue about whether demographic change was planned or accidental, the truth is, at the very least, it was underestimated. Whether that was intentional or not is up for debate, but once it started, it became politically and economically impossible to reverse. And this is how the country has changed. In 1960, about 90% of the US population was white. Today, it's closer to 58%. By 2045, white Americans are projected to become a minority. Now, that's not some fringe alt-right prediction. That is according to the US Census Bureau. And it's not just in the US either. In the UK, the white British population has dropped from 87% in 2001 to 74% in just 2 decades. In cities like London, Birmingham, and Leicester, white Brits are already in the minority. By 2063, they say that the whole country will become a Brit minority. Now, France, Sweden, Canada, Germany, same trends. Now, some people will look at that and say, okay, but so what? Populations change. Who cares? Other people will look at this data and feel like something's been lost to them. They feel like the culture that they grew up with and the values they believed in and the sense of their identity is being erased, right?
Those people want to preserve their countries as they remember them from time they were children. They want to preserve their countries free, independent, safe, clean and beautiful. They want their countries without hordes of illegal aliens and women and children in the streets, and they want their countries without daily terrorist attacks.
And to make things worse, when people talk about it, they're told that they're either racist or xenophobic or dangerous. And at the same time, politicians and media figures and even corporations are celebrating this as a good thing. Not just acknowledging it, but celebrating it. And that creates this really weird tension because people say that if this was the natural way of things, if diversity is meant to happen organically over time, and this is inevitable, well, then that's fine. But why is it being pushed on purpose? Why are people being punished for talking about it? Because if this was just about diversity and helping refugees or immigrants, you'd expect to see a balanced conversation. But we don't see that.
You have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted.
To make things worse, people argue that for some reason, you don't see diversity initiatives going in the other direction into non-white majority countries. You don't see governments encouraging white immigration into, say, Japan or China, Saudi Arabia or Nigeria. And if they did, those populations just wouldn't accept it. But in the West, resisting it is considered hateful. And when people speak out in places like the UK, they might even be arrested, literally, for saying things online. And that's why people feel upset. Because if you take their ability to speak and you change their environment faster than they can adapt to it, it feels like an invasion. And that's what's led this conversation devolving into conspiracy. So the next question is, okay, then what is the real reason why this is happening? Well, it turns out there is a bigger reason, and it has a lot to do with, you guessed it, money, economics. Why? Because one of the most powerful forces behind immigration is an idea called demographics. And when you understand how demographics work, you start to see the bigger picture of why all of this is happening and why some people believe it's necessary, at least economically speaking. So let's start with a very basic idea. Economic growth depends on people. More people means more workers, more consumers, people that buy stuff, more taxpayers, more innovation, more overall productivity. But there's a problem. Across the whole developed world right now, population growth is collapsing. The global fertility rate in the 1960s was over 5 children per woman. Today it's below 2.1, which is what economists call the replacement level. And that is the case in almost every developed country. These are not just low numbers. They are demographically disastrous to an economy. People are just not having enough kids. And when less people are born, you eventually have what? Less workers. That means less people paying into the system. But the number of retirees, people taking from the system, keeps on growing. Why? Because people are living longer thanks to advancements in medicine and technology and all those things. And that leads to things like underfunded pensions, slower economic growth, rising debt, right? So how do we fix that problem? Well, it's actually very easy. A country has to make more money than it spends. That's it. Grow the economy faster than people can take from it. But if you can't do that, which it seems like for now we can't, and if you can't or won't incentivize people to have more children, then you have to import. And if the native-born population is not replacing itself, that means new people have to be brought in from somewhere else. Okay then, but why? Right? Like, who does that benefit? And there's a very good explanation for that. But whether or not you will benefit from immigration depends on where you are in life. Here's why. Immigrants increase demand for housing, right? More for goods and services. They keep real estate markets strong. And maybe even more importantly, they help wealthy people get more wealthy, people who already hold assets. If you own property, for example, rental prices go up, makes you richer.
You have a lot of people have housing that because we have such a strong time and such a strong market, their houses are very valuable. It's a big part of their net worth, their house. I don't want to knock those numbers down.
If you own stocks, consumer spending goes up, makes you richer. If you collect taxes, your base just got bigger. If you have any wealth at all, whether you know it or not, you are indirectly benefiting economically from immigration. Now, if you're in power and you're a political leader, you have even more incentive to import people because it can help you get the votes. It helps you stay in power.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop.
So in that sense, immigration sort of has become the economic replacement theory. It's a strategy to replace lost growth with new people. But this strategy obviously leaves out a lot, right? It's very one-sided, and it raises a really hard question to answer, which is, what happens to the people who are used to living a certain way, who live in the real world, whose neighborhoods and schools have changed, and for people who might not own any assets at all? What happens to the cultural tension of a whole country when the strategy is to bring in people faster than the people can absorb them? What you get is very much what we're seeing right now in a lot of the world. And so then the question is, well, what good is a GDP if your country slowly becomes an LLC, a business that is in service not to its people, but to its profits? And that's where the conversation gets way harder, because it becomes less about the price and more about the common values. And here's what I mean. Economists can say, well, immigration helps the economy because growth goes up. But what that system does not account for is the cost of immigration for the people of that country, which explains where we are today, which is very divided and very angry. Now, you might have seen this.